Hi, I'm Karen, Against Breast Cancer's Sports Ambassador for 2020, and I'm now currently undergoing treatment for secondary breast cancer. I was first diagnosed about 10.5 years ago, and at that time I had two girls aged 4 and 7, and it was a very difficult time for all of us. When you found out that you've got breast cancer or any form of cancer, I think that's got to be one of the worst things that anyone could ever tell you, and it takes quite a while for that to sink in. I can remember for the first few days not really wanting to speak to anyone or really see anyone, and then of course I was faced with a really difficult task of having to tell my children. I've been really lucky as I've got a very supportive family and a very supportive husband, but I decided that talking to my girls about my breast cancer was something that I wanted to do. I really wasn't sure quite how to start the conversation, and so I took some advice from the breast nurse at Salisbury Hospital, who was really helpful throughout all of my treatment. So I asked her if she had any top tips for telling children about breast cancer, and she gave me this really helpful book called Mummy's Lump, and it's basically a story of a mum who finds a lump in her breast and goes to the hospital and finds out she has breast cancer. And then basically it talks through the different sorts of treatment that she's going to have to go through. And I used this book to tell my girls about my breast cancer. The other thing I asked her was, should I use the word cancer in front of them? Because I thought this might be a really worrying thing to talk about. But she said to me, well, the thing is, Karen, if you don't use that word, somebody else might. And that might happen in the playground or somewhere else. And if you haven't used the word cancer, that actually might be a lot more harmful and frightening and worrying for them. So I took her advice and sat down with my girls and went through the book, and I thought perhaps you might like to hear from them, just their memories of those times. Sienna, how old were you when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer?
About 7.
Do you remember that time at all?
No.
You've got a book there. What's that book called?
Mummy's Lump.
That was the book that I used to talk to you about having breast cancer. If you just have a look at it now, does any of it ring any bells with you?
No.
So it talks about Mummy going for some treatment to the hospital and finding a lump and what's going to happen. And on one of the pages there's a really nice picture, isn't there, of the mum looking in the mirror. And what's beside her by the mirror? Can you see that bit?
A wig.
Do you remember that I had a wig?
Yeah.
Do you remember anything funny about those times when I had a wig?
Going to Polton's and going on the ride and your wig nearly blew off.
Yeah, that was quite funny, that, wasn't it? I had to remember to take it off then, because it said, remove all hats and sunglasses, and I suddenly realised that maybe I should have removed my wig. Gabby, how old were you when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer?
I don't know, like 4.
Yeah, I think you were 4. You literally just started going to Wellow Primary School. Do you remember that book at all?
Yes.
You do. And when we went through it afterwards, I seem to remember that I asked you if you had any questions, didn't I?
I can't remember.
Do you remember what you said?
No.
I remember it really vividly. At the end of it, I said, oh, so anyone got any questions? And you thought for a minute and then you said, what's for tea? And that's typical of you, Gabs. I think that's the same for both of you, actually. You're quite practical girls, aren't you? Looking at that book now, do you think that book would be quite helpful to other children, Sienna?
Yeah. It's like a storybook.
It is, isn't it? And it explains really everything quite simply. So that was now 10.5 years ago, wasn't it? And we didn't have Luna then at that time, did we? But
No.
she's really part of our family now. Was there anything else during that time that was different about being a family?
We were sent to other people's houses a lot for dinner.
That's
or
right.
Sleepovers.
Sleepovers, yeah. And my friends used to look after you and cook your meals and things. Who else who's in our family used to look after you, Gabby?
Nan.
Nan, that's right. And where did Nan used to take you, Sienna?
Swimming.
Swimming lessons, yeah, that's right.
And then gave us burnt dinner.
Dinner. Nothing much has changed there, actually, has it? So I know it's a long time ago that I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Do you think, Sienna, that it's made any difference to you?
Everyone's always said I've been very old for my age, even now when I'm 18. So I guess you just learn how to look after yourself better without your mum as much.
Gabby?
Still can't iron.
I still can't iron. Gabby, do you think there's been anything that you've thought about or anything that's perhaps made you different because I've had breast cancer?
Maybe I'm not as over dramatic as some people are. Some people get little injuries and they make a massive deal of it. Not me, because I know what a real problem is. Do you know what I mean?
Thanks. And just lastly, Sienna, if you had a friend now whose mum had cancer of some sort, what advice might you give them?
That it gets worse before it gets better.
You would say that to your friend.
You've got to be realistic. I'm 18.
But it does get better, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Gabby, anything you might say to your friends?
That they're going to be okay. You just get through it.
You get through it, that's right. Well, thanks very much.